there.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I woke up this morning and I really thought it was Saturday.
Are you serious?
It
Oh, that's sad.
was very sad.
uh, I mean, Friday would be one thing, but like Saturday, I guess it's been a long week.
Guess so. I also, I'm just not sure. Like, maybe I was dreaming something and it just felt like it made sense. I really don't know.
That's funny.
But yeah, I think that set the tone for today.
At least, so, and you work from home, right? I think we said.
Generally, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's good at least.
Yeah. The pets like it anyway.
How's
Um,
everything going?
Good. It's busy.
Mhm.
I think slowly but surely things are kind of falling into place.
Hi, Ariane. Hey, Cindy.
Hi.
Hey.
How are
So
you both?
good. How are you?
Good.
Doing okay. Trying to stay caught up, and I'm not. I'm failing miserably.
Ugh, it's the story of my life.
Yeah. I brought my younger daughter to school in San Francisco, so lost a little bit of time there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You didn't have to drive.
No, just
Okay.
lots of time in the airport.
Yeah.
And apparently at the car rental place, it took me 2.5 hours to get a car. Yeah.
Wow.
Never again.
Wow. I like Oakland. I like the Oakland airport. I don't know if that's close, like wherever you're going, but
Might consider it in the future.
yeah.
Hi,
It's
Michael.
The San Francisco airport isn't that close to downtown or anything. So
No, I mean it takes a little while. It's a good ways south, but then the traffic really
Yeah.
hampers things.
So did we miss minutes approval from
we did.
last?
And I would say I keep forgetting it. So none of the subcommittees have been doing it. And I've been adding that to the minutes as it, yeah. They're already posted online just with a big draft stamp on them. So I just doesn't resonate.
I shall.
Sorry, I'm late, Cindy.
No, don't worry. Michael, do you know if Stephen is coming?
I am not 100% sure if he's coming, but I'm happy to be his designee.
Okay, perfect. And then I think Denise said she was going to be on, but I think we can go ahead and get started if we want to.
Sure. So starting with the minutes approval.
You motion?
Then what? Do we need a second? What's the?
I think we should probably do a second and just approve. Yeah. And
Yeah,
if Michael's a
okay.
stand-in. Yeah.
Okay. Second. And then, yeah.
Discussion. We all good? Okay.
Good.
Yeah. Michael, any issues?
Yeah, my computer's not remembering my CT250 password. I gotta be honest. I'm gonna make it resend me the password, but I'm okay otherwise.
Okay.
will say, I'm pretty sure the minutes were emailed to everybody and nobody had any corrections.
And then just to
They
clarify,
look familiar to me.
and then
Sorry,
just to,
Phil.
that's okay. Just to clarify, Ariane, was it you seconded?
Mhm.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And Michael, I'm working on resetting your password. It's just gonna take me a sec.
Okay, thank you.
I'll throw in the chat a link to the bylaws.
I just had it up.
So the whole preamble, was the whole thing new? Since last time? I didn't remember.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, I really like it. And I actually really like where it says recommit to each other.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember, to be honest, where I pulled this from. And I can't remember if it was our conversation.
It was our first conversation.
Okay, great.
Stephen started something with this, and I think I sort of weighed in on some of it, and then it came together, I think, through Michael's wordsmithing, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't remember.
Well,
That sounds good.
either way, I do really like it.
Oh, yeah. I think, yeah, I would think one of the others, it might have been Maryland, they may have had a preamble, I'm not 100% going from memory. And then I see the word Connecticans, which I haven't heard before. I know nutmeggers is an older traditional word. I'm not married to it either way, but yeah, thanks for including that.
Maybe I'm being overly pedantic about it. I was sort of deferring to one of our partner organizations, Connecticut Explored, that sort of talked a little bit about the different words that have been ascribed to Connecticut's people. And they've settled on Connecticans.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, with the word nutmeggers, I mean, I don't know how many people from out of this state will be reading these bylaws, but I don't think anyone from out of the state would understand what nutmeggers was referring to.
Us.
As a native New Jerseyan, I will say I never heard that term before.
So I'll go ahead and edit that there. Keep it easy. I do see a note here from you, Jason, about adding in the common good or replacing the common good. And I know someone said they like each other.
The common good to me seemed a little subjective, like it could be seen as subjective, whereas each other like refers specifically to your fellow citizens, which I thought was like a nice image.
I am fine with that. I wanted to sort of reflect some of the themes of the commission, and one of them is for the common good.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily have to emerge here in the preamble.
Okay. So moving down to points that had questions. I did have a question in general about voluntary advisors. limitations on compensation. I know it's not a problem with you, Jason, but I wonder in situations where a commission member or subcommittee member gets a grant for something that is related to the 250th, but not necessarily the work of the commission, do we need to add in any language clarifying that?
Is there a conflict of interest? I mean, I know we do conflict of interest forms with our own boards and say some members receive funding. I don't know if we address it in that way.
Looks like I took that right out of the executive board.
Say that again, Michael. You're a little choppy.
I believe that line is right out of the executive order for Connecticut.
Okay.
I think it is.
That's why it's so brief like that. I'm gonna see if I have this stack with me. You can keep talking.
Yeah, I'm 99% sure it is right out of the executive order. And so,
So their service is different than a funded grant.
right.
So
That's
I think that's enough of a barrier there.
okay.
I think, unless, you know, Michael or Ariane have any concern.
That particular line was right out of it. It's under it's section 3, Roman numeral 3. Members of the commission shall not receive any compensation for their service. Period. And I would probably distinguish that from reimbursement or something like that. Compensation being like extra above and beyond.
Okay. So this section was in Maryland, and there was a question of whether we should sorry, rereading my notes. Advisory members are mentioned elsewhere, and I don't think we will not have, as far as I'm aware, any designees from the legislature. So we probably can just leave this out unless anyone thinks that's going to change.
I don't think we're going to issue a new executive order if that's what you mean.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and delete that. And vacancies, there was a question of whether we should define vacancies and how we'll deal with that. The executive order gives the governor the ability to, or no, I guess a different section in here states that the governor is the only one who can appoint successors. So I assume that if there's a vacancy, he's the one who will have to fill that vacancy, and we don't really need to detail that.
So I think with the exception of three members of the public, every one of those positions is defined by somebody's role at a particular organization. So if there's a vacancy, it should be filled vis-a-vis the organizational framework, right?
I wouldn't see a problem with just leaving this here, even if there's the mention of the governor's appointments earlier.
Hi, Denise.
Hi, sorry, I was all teed up at 2 o'clock and then kind of drifted off into other projects. Hi.
Hello.
We are moving through the bylaws.
Ah, okay.
Do you have a link to the document?
Not right in front of me, no.
In the chat.
It's in the chat, okay.
Yeah.
Yep,
Oh
oh yeah, all right, got it.
Okay, so we were talking about vacancies and whether we need to include anything. There's pretty generic language about any vacancy in the membership of the commission being filled in the same manner. Which I
That
assume,
makes sense.
so that's fine, we can leave that in. Then the next point that had a question mark was section 7 on page 3. Initially, this said, the Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development shall provide the commission with resources and staff as feasible and necessary for administering and facilitating the work of the commission. I edited that to be administrative and technical support is feasible and necessary, since the administrating and facilitate, the facilitating would be taking place at CTH, not DECD. Does that make sense? That was a lot.
So I know I
Does that
have a
go-
thumbs up here. Go ahead, Michael.
I mean, that's expressly enumerated in the, under section 7I, the administrative technical support of the DECD. Does that go against the executive order? Not having that, or what do you think?
I was going to say, I think, I don't think that we have the ability to change the language of the executive order here, but I think for clarifying somewhere else below, that we can address how Connecticut Humanities is facilitating the work of the commission.
Yeah, so the language in the document is from the executive order. The language I removed, I think, was edited from the language that Maryland used. So I replaced it with the exact line from the executive order.
Okay, all right, that's helpful.
So what's here, the administrative and technical support, is what's in the executive order.
Okay.
So in that case, are we okay with this as written? Okay, perfect. Right. So you have,
I think this is all from the executive order and we probably can't change it.
yeah. So I'm gonna reject that.
Yeah.
And we'll just have to live with celebration. And then I added a section 8 that is just Connecticut Humanities shall serve as the administrative agent for the commission and act as the nonprofit fiduciary.
Is everybody okay with that? Just to be clear, I know we've addressed this with the commission before, but is the language acceptable?
Yes, for me.
Perfect. So under Article 3, there's this section on notice and waivers. And it's in regards to notice of all meetings of the commission being sent to all members of the commission. We have not been doing this, so I didn't feel the need to add it into our workflow at this point. I don't know why Maryland felt the need to include it, and don't know if it has something to do with their rules for commissions.
Do we post the notice of our meetings? We do, yeah.
We do
So there's-
online, and we send it to the Secretary of State's office.
Right. That's our process in Connecticut for all commissions, as I understand it.
Yeah,
Yeah, so this would be, so they have some sort of special notice just for the commission members? Is that the deal?
I think so. I assume it's so that commission members aren't notified the day before that they have to meet.
Right.
But we generally
Yeah, you,
decide on the schedule a year ahead of time.
well, and you send a reminder notice around. I mean, I've gotten them, so.
So I'm looking right now. I do believe the language cites section 1-225, which gives 48 hours, not 7 days. In the very first paragraph, A, subsection A, if that's helpful. And,
Is that
and a special meeting requires 24 hours.
right?
Okay, so that's fair game. And we cover that by getting the information out sooner.
Yeah.
So,
It's
so it would
also,
seem that that section's superfluous.
yeah, if we're already citing 1-225 or what the number is, that's we don't have to like write that whole law back in there either. If it's
Okay.
already cited to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I'll go ahead and remove this and we'll just continue abiding by Connecticut statutes.
Right.
Perfect.
Yeah.
For oh, so Maryland specifies that the non-voting members do not count towards a quorum, but we do not have non-voting members
Exactly.
of the commission. So
Take that out. Yeah, I would just take that out.
section voting by electronic mail without a meeting. So
Cindy,
we
Sorry,
what was that?
just to say, in section 5, there's also a sentence about non-voting members. We should take that out as well, right? The non-voting members shall have no right to vote on any matter brought before the commission. See that sentence? We can remove that too, I think, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you just say all members present and counted toward quorum at the meeting shall be entitled to one vote. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So voting by electronic mail, there was a question of whether or not we would want to ever have a vote by email. For example, at this last meeting, we talked about voting by email on the approvals process for posting an event. And then when we then realized that we had never decided whether that was okay or not. So the question is, do we ever want to vote by email without having a meeting? And if so, does this all sound fair? And I haven't read it in a month at this point.
So from my recollection, on the municipal side of things, if you propose something like that, if there's a question or discussion or back or forth, then it could be considered an illegal meeting. Is there quorums? There's all kinds of stuff that happens. And this is in relation to if we had a meeting, but like if we look at the legislature, we had a meeting, a couple members didn't show up, the roll is open till 2. They better respond by 2 p.m. and then they can vote yes or no. Something like that versus like, oh, we're just going to blanket allow voting by email. But then if a member's like, well, what about this or what about that? Then it could become problematic. That's not to make a decision, but that's just background information. And I think that's different than concurrently if I'm a member on the phone or if I'm a member in the Zoom meeting and I'm doing it live electronically like this, that's okay. Versus after the fact, 2 hours later, 2 days later, a week later, and then any kind of discussion that may pop up as a result of a absent member having a question about something that could make it problematic technically.
And then I'm just thinking, Cindy, sorry, Denise, just quickly, the reply all function. So maybe someone gets dropped off the thread, or, you know, someone's not responding. We don't have the full snapshot, or we have to dig into all the separate things to make sure we have a complete folder. That might just be something to keep in mind too.
And there's no members of the public as part of that.
So it sounds like this particular section opens us up to some compromising scenarios that we might just want to avoid.
Absolutely, because, you know, don't forget, the first sentence is the important one. You're having a vote without a meeting. And that's already an issue, because what you're doing is you're circumventing the whole meeting process with this. Now, you know, you might want to have that for an absolute emergency, let's say, but I mean, I can't imagine an emergency where, for example, if the electricity went off, you're not going to be able to do electronic mail either. So I don't see what problem this actually solves, honestly.
Okay.
I would just take it out. You know, we could run into problems at some point. If so, we can amend the bylaws, you know, if it's a real issue. That's my opinion.
Because for the approval of events or projects, would you really need enough like official vote in this way? Or could we establish another method of approving?
Yeah, I don't think we would need a vote necessarily. It was, yeah, it was just brought up at the last meeting. And so I think if we're all in agreement that we won't do any electronic votes, then that's fine.
I'm fine with that.
Maryland outlines that they're going to use Robert's Rules of Order. I don't know if we need to outline exactly what document or what rules we're going to use.
Well, it doesn't hurt to put it in there, I don't think. This is getting pretty formalistic, I would say, for a small commission like this. You know, that's you know, you don't want to go too far with these rules, but I guess it's sort of obvious that we're using Robert's rules. I mean, there are other rules, but in government situations, mostly we use Robert's rules. I don't know.
Yeah, initially Michael omitted both of these. The Robert's Rules of Orders and the section on keeping books and records. And so I think we can do, at the end of the day, we're adhering by FOIA if we don't include this information. So all of the minutes are already publicly accessible, same with agendas and other information. But that said, Jason, you brought up that books, we wouldn't want to include them anyway since CTH is fiduciary, but should CTH be providing a summary of revenue and expenses to the commission on an annual basis or periodic basis?
That's a pretty big issue, actually.
I think if we're accountable to the commission, it would be good practice to be transparent in that way.
I do too, especially since in the end, the commission will be held accountable for a lot of this if something happens. It wouldn't just be the Humanities Council. So yeah, it seems like that would be good practice.
Is that something that needs to be encoded in bylaws?
I don't see how it hurts if that's our intention. It's not an added duty. It just says that you have to keep it at your principal office. It's not adding, is that adding anything? No, you're going to be doing that anyway. So, and it doesn't, Cindy's right. We adhere to FOIA one way or the other. I don't know if FOIA covers records of this kind. I don't know. This
The
is where,
only overlap that I would be concerned with is part of the reason that we are administering this is to protect the privacy of donors. So as
right,
long as we're not making that public through this process, it's fine. And I think if we're just looking at the bulk revenue and expenses, we should be fine. And I don't think that the commission would want to see every individual's or corporation's name.
no.
Yeah, with PMI probably.
I'm more familiar with the issues we've had with, not with commissions so much as with what do you call them, the quasi-publics, where we've had a lot of issues about who gets to see what and who knows what's going on, and books and records. Is there anything that would mean that you'd have to disclose donors if this is on our bylaws? I don't know. Does that encompass that or not? You know, complete books and records of account activities and transactions of the commission.
The only thing I can think, do checks count as transactions, like checks coming in? Because, I mean, we keep all of that for audit purposes, but we wouldn't necessarily be disclosing those to the public. One thing is our financial report, a whole different thing is the actual transaction information.
Well, by the way, this is just talking about the commission. This is not talking about Connecticut Humanities. It just says the commission shall keep at its principal office correct and complete books. That's slightly different, isn't it?
Well, this is a proposal. Michael, I want to hear from you on this. I mean, there's a responsibility of the commission, maybe we include that, but is there a responsibility for Connecticut Humanities to provide to the commission, or how might that be structured?
So as I look at it, my first question is, well, where's the principal office, right? Because this isn't a state agency.
Good point.
So does that mean Connecticut Humanities? Does that mean Cindy's home office? Does it mean our Google Drive?
Yeah, good point.
So what, and we'll presume the entirety of the Google Drive would be subject to FOIA. And as far as transactions, accounts payable, accounts receivable, I would assume that would include checks, but not necessarily checks to CT Humanity unless it's specifically designated for this 250 project. I would presume those would be FOIA requestable. CT Humanities is assuming the fiduciary responsibility, which kind of opens the door. But again, I would presume it would be anything related to this project versus the funding of the West Hartford Women's Chorale, right? Which would be a separate line item project. So it just, one thing, it says any of the books, records, and minutes of the commission may be in written form and any other form capable with being converted into written within a reasonable time. There's just that word any opens the door on all kinds of stuff, but I wouldn't really presume to be overly worried about it. And I do believe that this specific language is just, once again, placeholder copying from some other state that is also utilizing it, just like the other section right before regarding Robert's rules. Robert's rules are great, but does everyone know it? Are we supposed to provide a book of Robert's rules to every single member? Are we now going to be saying point of order? Do we have a parliamentarian who's going to uphold all of those rules? Who's going to be familiar with Robert's rules? Denise, I know you're going to be familiar with it, but a lot of the other folks on the board may not be. Are advisory board members able to raise a point of order? Are full commission members only allowed to raise a point of order? So Sometimes it's easy at the pleasure of the chair. But I don't know if that's how we're doing it here. So
We have been operating very informally, honestly, and that's from somebody like me who's been used to operating in a much more formal way in the General Assembly. But this whole thing is much more elaborate than I mean, we don't even have a bank account. We don't have a principal office. We don't, we're not envisioning any of that, are we? I mean, I think this commission is more honorary than anything. And so that's where we kind of we weren't even sure we needed bylaws, honestly. So I would take advice on all of that. I don't know. We're not even envisioning accepting dollars of any kind at this point, because the Humanities Council is the fiduciary agent. So I don't see any need for any of that, honestly. I don't know how everybody else feels.
I also feel like this section is superfluous given that we're already posting minutes and have all of that information open to the public. I do wonder if up where we put in the fiduciary, the CTH's fiduciary agent, if there we include something like CTH will make an annual report to the commission of its expenses, revenue and expenses relative to commission operations. And that's just where that lives. And
Yeah.
that's
That
where
makes sense to me.
That's a great suggestion, actually. Because I think we're almost like recreating everything for the commission that's being done by Humanities. And that seems very excessive to me. This is not, yeah, this is envisioning a much larger and different structure than what we have, I think. So I think that's a great suggestion, Cindy.
I similarly feel like at this time we may not need that. We're already referencing the executive order, which discusses freedom of information and codes of ethics that are already on the books. So housed within all of that should cover the intentionality of that section 8 proposed language.
I'll remove this. Okay. So down in the subcommittee section, we have the subcommittees outlined. At the last meeting, there was talk of whether we needed to just include a quick line that subcommittee chairs are appointed by the chair of the commission from among members of the commission.
Good idea.
And then the other bigger question that we discussed at that last meeting was about this idea of an executive committee and whether we should have one. We talked about the fact that the full group of subcommittee chairs has met in the past and served kind of that role. And some of the language in here references that. And I think the question was, would that make sense in case we ever did have to sign a contract of some sort? The only one I can think of that has come across our desks so far has been the America 250 Foundation contract that needed to be signed by the commission, not by Connecticut Humanities. And so if something like that came and we had to do a quick turnaround and didn't want to get the entire commission together, having an executive committee empowered to make that decision would be helpful.
I feel like there was also the example of reviewing names and potential applicants of volunteer advisory members and whether that made sense to have all of them only during formal meetings, or whether an executive committee might have the flexibility to, meet on their own time and on their own time decide who would be qualified and to finalize those types of votes before bringing it to the full commission or something like that.
So it seems like there's a need.
Yeah, and I think the language in here is fairly straightforward. And again, we've been recording those meetings, posting the minutes, so it's all public still.
I think, yeah, Cindy, I think it might be important to have this. I'm just thinking as we're talking about situations where this could come up. I'm thinking, the extensive discussions we've had about what's the role of the commission. Are we going to be endorsing projects or merely facilitating projects and so forth? And having an executive committee structure at least allows you to have those conversations before meetings, even formulating agendas and things. I think it's a good thing to have this here. I don't know how. Does this create an obligation if the executive committee wants to meet? It looks like it consists of the chair, vice chair, and chairs of each subcommittee. So that would mean you'd have to include the chairs of all the subcommittees in every discussion about, let's say, the agenda for the quarterly meeting.
I don't know. I don't think we would have to. I think we'd be open to it, but I don't see any reason we would be forced to include them in conversations about the agenda.
Okay. See, as it is now, we have no structure to be able to have, we're just doing it. We're not asking anybody's permission. We're just kind of putting together the agenda, and it's fine and it's gone fine, but you can run into problems with that. Sometimes if somebody objects, they want something on the agenda and and it's not there, for example. I think we do need some sort of executive committee structure to make interim decisions because we only have quarterly meetings, and that's a pretty long time in between meetings. You can always call a special meeting, but that's a little more cumbersome. So
Yeah, I like the openness of this language that kind of allows for the executive committee to be what we want it to be at any time.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, I'd leave it in. Yeah.
Perfect. Quorum voting. Oh, so we talked about subcommittees and voting. We did somewhere in here, I know we expressly say that any subcommittee decisions are non-binding to here it is. Subcommittee may vote to make an advisory recommendation to the commission, but all subcommittee votes are non-binding.
Right.
So that makes it so that we do not have to have quorum of commission members at a subcommittee, and votes count. The question here was the language said that the act of a majority of those present at the subcommittee meeting shall be the act of the subcommittee, and we talked about, will there be some subcommittees that prefer a unanimous decision, and if so, do we want to change the language to be at least, and then give subcommittees the freedom to decide how they want to do any votes that they conduct?
I don't feel strongly either way about that.
Is there something about the democratic process that we want to model here that we're sort of laying out in the preamble? Consensus versus majority versus
I mean, it's really majority rule. I mean, that's, that's the way it works in our society, in our particular form of democracy, right? Um,
As I'm viewing it, to take a step back, there's the advisory council or the subcommittee members or the subcommittees that have advisory members in them. They can discuss a topic, they can vote amongst themselves in a non-binding way. If it's a majority or greater, they can bring it forward to the full commission that actually, those are the voting members, and then those are the votes that would count as far as whether it's something that gets adopted, whether or not it's by a majority or a unanimous requirement, because these advisory members are volunteers and their vote would only be within that subcommittee body, and it wouldn't be binding. It would just be to bring it forward as a proposal for the consideration of the voting members.
that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
My understanding, right?
Mhm.
I'll leave it with just a majority.
Yeah.
Oh, we're so close to the end. Um, so the next question was about voluntary advisors. Oh, and this goes back to the commission or compensation. Voluntary advisors serve in an advisory capacity only, are not entitled to vote on matters before the commission, may not count towards a quorum of the commission, and are not entitled to any compensation. So here, do we add for their service and just make it so that they're not entitled to any compensation for their service on this subcommittee?
I would say yes, because otherwise there could be people that are volunteers, but also may make some sort of proposal to the council. I'm sure
Yeah.
that's true, you know.
That's what brought it up. It was the Matt Warshauer conference question.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So then that works. Then there were two more sections that were in the Maryland bylaws that were question marks of whether we wanted to include them or not. Advisory council, in addition to participation at commission and subcommittee meetings, voluntary advisors will be considered members of an advisory council that may be periodically convened by the chair in an advisory role. Okay, so that was language not in Maryland. I made it up based on the way we've been talking about the advisory council.
That's in alignment with what we've been discussing.
Yeah, I'm not sure we absolutely need it. I mean, it seems, yeah, I mean, it's fine, but participation of volunteer will be considered.
I think it just defines who they are and what their role is and how they're engaged in the process.
That's fine. That's fine.
And then there was a question of whether we should include the youth council in here. And I don't know if we really need to, especially given that I don't think we know what the role of the youth council is yet, and whether they fit in better as part of education or how we want to engage them.
Yeah, that we'd originally had them as a subcommittee, and then we've talked about subsuming them within one of the other subcommittees. So
we've imagined them in a variety of different roles, and I don't think we've really figured out what makes the most sense.
yeah.
Or even how to find them. Yeah, I know. This is the one we have done the least work on, honestly, and it's still not defined. So I think this would mean we'd have to create a youth council, wouldn't it? I mean, we don't really have one now.
Yeah.
We could say something about that we could create one, but I don't think we need to have this in the bylaws, honestly.
And if we have youth council, does it last for 5 years? Students, rotate out. How do they get in? How do they get out?
Right. Those are all,
It's tricky.
There's all sorts of other stuff that opens up with that.
yeah.
And I had an interesting conversation today with the chair or president of the Connecticut Association for Student Councils.
Oh,
His name is Chris Tomlin. He has some interesting, he said he has about a dozen or so students that he could recommend, but that we really need to do a lot more work in terms of defining what we want the students to engage with before approaching them. And I think we tend to say, well, we'll let them figure out what they want to do, but then it creates a kind of weird scenario.
yeah.
And then the rest we were okay with last time, so I think it's all fairly cleaned up now.
Huzzah.
Yay. And I can send it to everyone here to do one final read through before we send it to the full commission. Do we need to have a legal review? Michael, do you count as that?
A lot of responsibility. I think that's, you know, commissions and boards are intended for the layperson, right? We had a part-time legislature because they were farmers, and this is supposed to be understandable. I feel that this is in alignment with the executive order of the governor of Connecticut, which is what matters most. And we've utilized good bits that other states have been doing. I think Denise is right. You know, if we need to go back in and you know, make updates, we can do that. So I feel comfortable with this document at this time. And also, if we want to feel a little bit better about it, we can definitely send it, including to Steve, who is also an attorney, and he can also take a look at it. But I feel comfortable with it as it's written. It has all the parts of references, code of ethics, and FOIA. So we should be okay with this.
Wonderful. Thank
Yeah.
you, Michael.
Yeah, my mind is like on a whole other topic, which is just wanting to like be as broadly capturing as many different Connecticut opportunities as possible. You know, I mentioned in the last meeting East Haddam, and I drove and I saw like this sign, and it was like Drummond 5 volunteers wanted, you know, and they like went through the trouble of going to some print shop to put it on the metal like election sign poles and put it in yards and stuff. And I'm like, we need to capture that. And we should have a central place for opportunities to get posted, or at least to inquire about them, so that we can, because this state is so disparate. That had him on the other side of the river. That's Higginham. That's east. That's west of the river. You know, like that's a whole. You know, we want to try to capture all of these things. So I really, for me, to make this entire endeavor as like truly engaging and authentic as possible, we should find some way to be able to solicit to all of the first selectmen, all the mayors, all the town managers, all the town councils, like, what do you got going on that's relevant? And like I said, there's Thunder in the Valley, that's in October. And I believe we have our next full meeting like within 3 or 4 days before that particular event takes place. And I just hope we do stuff like that going forward.
We're definitely building the structures.
Yeah, well said, Michael. I totally agree. You're speaking my language, as Jason knows. I've been talking about this over and over again. Like, how do we get people engaged? That's our primary job, is to really, you know, get people engaged in this. At least let them know it's happening. I think
you know what? I'm just thinking about something. So I was the administrator for the statewide senior center work group. The legislature last year got $10 million of ARPA funding for all the senior centers. And Senator Austin, as the co-chair of appropriations, wrote a letter to all of the 11 towns in her Senate district? And what if we got a letter from the chair to all of the municipal leaders, and we did something like that, and we just like, it's like an introduction letter. Hi, we're the CT 250 group. We're looking for different opportunities. Here's the link for your town or city to submit what you think might be important. And that might be a good way to engage with them to try to capture stuff like that.
That's also in Secretary Thomas's next upcoming email out to all town leaders. I think Cindy provided me with the blurb. I kind of embellished it a bit and added some links. So that will be going out in hers, which was, I'm not sure of the date, but I could find out for you guys.
And my next plan is to go to all the COGs, because that's where the first selectman, I mean, it's one thing, you send a letter out and it kind of goes in the pile. We want to make sure that doesn't happen. So the next thing we're going to do is Jonathan Harris and I. Jonathan is co-chairing our basically leadership council, we're calling it. And Jonathan and I and Sarah Harris, who's the other co-chair from the Mohegan tribes, will go around to all the COGs and talk to as many first selectmen as we can capture, because that's where they go for those meetings. So that'll be another way we can do some outreach. I think you're absolutely right. I think we need to reach out to the town leadership at the town leadership level. And my goal is to have a committee, or at least a contact person in every town in the state that we can send this stuff to. This is our biggest challenge, is to put together that network so that everybody's getting all the information and that we get the information about what they're up to.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. We also talked a bit about getting info out to state reps, especially, during downtime when they're looking for content, looking for things to promote, talk about, that if we can create some posts, some graphics that's easy for them to kind of put out.
Yeah, I'm thinking about creating an America 250 caucus at the legislature. And I imagine an awful lot of them will want to join. I've mentioned it to a great number of them already. And this is one of these issues where everybody's going to want to be part of it. Our challenge is going to be finding a role for everybody. I think it's the opposite of almost everything else I've ever done. I don't think we're going to have to try to talk people into it. It's going to be, everybody's going to want to do something, but we just have to get it organized.
Yeah.
So
Wait.
if we do that, just to be clear, we might want to then add that section back in. I think it was Maryland that had language regarding legislators as non-voting members. And if there's a America 250 caucus, which would presumably be bipartisan,
Yes.
how would that relate to our group? Would they be volunteers, advisory capacity only? Would they bring forward proposals? I don't think that's something we have to figure out today. It's just something I'm mentioning because it reminds me of, I think it was Maryland that also did that. They had the Senate pro tem and that Speaker of the House, I think, had like 2 appointments each that were non-voting advisory capacity only. So I'm just mentioning that.
Yeah, actually, in Connecticut, any legislator can form a caucus if they want to, about anything. We don't traditionally do much of that, but I think this kind of lends itself to it. And it wouldn't be anything that formal. I don't think it would have any real connection to the commission itself. I think it would just be a group of I'm hoping to get, a couple of people in the House and the Senate to be kind of like the leaders of this group in there and get people into the caucus. And then that becomes a way that we just get support from them when we go ask them for things. And I've already had several who said they want to be part of it. We were up at the old Newgate prison and John Kissel was jumped right up and said, I want to be part of this, so I know I can get interest from across the aisle and everywhere on this. How much effort they'll put into it, who knows, but it'll be kind of an honorary thing, I think.
Can we get lapel pins? Is that permissible?
Once we get our new logo, we can look into getting lapel pins.
Absolutely.
I like that.
Dolphins will be a big part of that caucus. They'll love that.
Love it.
Oh.
So looking back at the agenda,
So I just wanted to, I had put on there like next steps with the bylaws, because I wasn't sure what the process was with this. It goes to the full commission now, is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so then it'll come up at the next meeting.
Which is, so we need to get this out to them. How much notice do we need for something on the agenda? Is it there a time?
we usually send the agenda. So the agenda needs to be posted 48 hours in advance of the meeting. We typically send out the agenda about a week beforehand with the attachments. And then when we post the agenda online, we normally create PDFs of any attachments and include a link so that anyone who's out there looking can see what we're posting. So I think that's everything.
Okay.
And Cindy, I know we're at time, and I don't know if we want to squeeze in number 3 or postpone that, but I did want to just double check with the group. I know we had talked about some meetings in person when possible and virtual, and I just for scheduling purposes was looking ahead at September and was just curious if this group hopes to meet virtually next month or in person. And I know Stephen's not here, so we can, maybe Cindy, we can send an email around just to double check so everyone can weigh in, but I just thought I'd throw that out now for folks to think about.
I think we did talk about trying to be in person this time, but then it didn't work out scheduling wise. So it may end up the same, where we'll try for in person, and then if it has to be virtual to get it in.
Or you're talking September, Shell?
Yes, so the governance subcommittee will meet again in September. So we have the date and time already locked down. It's just whether it's virtual or in person.
Is there other business we need to attend to with respect to governance outside of the bylaws right now? I'm just wondering if that's an unnecessary meeting. I know that we were concerned that we'd need to meet a number of times to get this in order, but I mean, Michael has really put this on hyperdrive with his attention to this. And if we're wrapping it up now, do we need a September meeting?
Yeah, that was actually going to be my question too. I wasn't really sure what else was pressing for now, the fall. That's a really busy week, that week of the 18th for us. There's ROVAC conference, there's town committee conference, there's National Voter Registration Day on the 19th. It's a lot.
I'm glad you bring it, which reminds me, do we have, are we going to have information about the commission at some of those conferences? Can the secretary do that for us? That's a great way to spread, that's a network of people out there, all those election workers, they're, one from each party. There's like 800 people that come to that conference. It's a big one. The ROVAC. When is the ROVAC?
Yeah. So our day is on the 20th. So it's the 19th and 20th. Our Secretary of the State Day is the 20th. And then the 21st is the town clerk conference. So she and I think the deputy also speaks at ROVAC. So I can add this to talk about for her talking points.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Is that something that we can attend and support, Ariane?
I'm not really sure, actually. I don't know. Denise, you may know.
Well, I mean, yeah, sure. I'm sure they'd let me come and say a few words, but in some ways I'd like to have the secretary do it, because that, in her role as as being a member of the commission. I mean,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be bad as chair, and since they all know me, but I kind of think she can do this one, and it gives it just as much oomph. And maybe if we had some way to sign people up right on the spot, because these are absolutely people that should be getting this information and part of committees in their towns. They are very active usually, and like I say, there's one of each party, and they are people that could get really involved in this. So maybe we'd even have some sort of call to action.
Yeah, if you guys send me a link to wherever you think it's best for them to go, whether it's a mailing list sign up or volunteer sign up. She also has monthly calls with all the registrars or voters or whoever joins the calls, but she has monthly calls. So this can be something that can come up, later. She has calls with she has town clerk calls as well. So we can put these on future agendas too for those.
The conference is a really good place to.
Yeah.
I could always just call, who's president this year? I could just call and see if they'd put me on the, or me on the agenda on their, on the other day, not the Secretary of State's day. And then she could flesh it more,
Yeah. Okay. That's an idea. I think, isn't it Chris Prue?
Prue still? Yeah.
Yeah.
Get in touch with him and see if I could just make a brief announcement about it, and then she could talk about it more fully when she does her little speech at noon, which we used to do, right? She could bring it up as something that's perfect for election officials to take part in and to be part of their communities. It'd be a positive. I think it'd be a good thing for her to talk about. Yeah. These are really active citizen people, volunteer, very, very much. They might be the kind of people that would volunteer to do things in their communities. So, yeah. All right. I'll put that on my note to call Chris Prue and see if I can shoehorn myself in for a few minutes somewhere on one of the 2 days they do the conference. Where are they doing the conference?
That I'm not sure of.
All right. Well, okay. I got it on my list. That'll just be part of more outreach than governance, I realize, but that's all right.
Great. I think the only other item that if we can do 2 minutes is the David Adams and the Urban Assembly. He is planning to attend the meeting in October, but at our last meeting, Stephen asked for more of a directive from us about what we want David Adams to speak about. And of course, Stephen's not here to kind of help guide that part of the conversation right now. So if we don't meet in September, I'm worried that we won't have this conversation at all. Or maybe we can just ask Stephen to send us an email, I guess.
That might be the way to do it. I know he wants David to come speak, and David's a practiced speaker who may have something specific to say, and Stephen may just want to know if we had particular aspects or framing that we want included into whatever he's going to talk about, or topics or something like that. I'm just here to help facilitate with this meeting. I didn't have any specific things, but perhaps I didn't know if Denise or Jason, if you had anything specifically in mind. Jason, maybe a phone call with Steve might also help, as you guys were at that initial meeting where he brought it up, for clarifying it.
I'm just looking at the minutes from the June 27th meeting when Stephen brought it up. And it's just saying meeting to talk about the importance of this work that he does with the Urban Assembly and framing what we've heard from our leaders in the public. Urban Assembly focuses on social and emotional skill building, relational tools in the service of democracy. So somewhere along those lines, but maybe some clarifying notes from Stephen, and I'm happy to jump on a call as well.
I think we ought to have a quick call about it. This all came up in my initial conversation with Steve when I just met with him, and it was when we were in the throes of the IDEA committee and the work we were doing on making sure everyone was heard, and we had the various meetings about that. And that's when he brought up this person as someone who is very good at talking about how we handle these conversations and how he felt it would fit into the mission of the commission. So I do think we need to hear a little more from him directly, because I'll be more comfortable about why we have this person coming.
Yeah, when I watched a video of David talking a little bit about the work that he does with the Urban Assembly, and I think what struck me the most is it's sort of the building the total student, with that social emotional, but not just cherry picking the people in service of democracy, but really how do we round this out for our society? How do we elevate everybody as participants? And if it's focused on that, that'd be great. But without taking up more time, if we land in a conversation with Stephen, I think that'd be great. That's my recollection of
Yeah, I agree.
David's
So,
work.
so Jason, should I, and I'm happy to do this, Cindy, should I reach out to Stephen, and would it just be you, Denise, and Stephen on the call, just to kind of narrow that down, or just you and Stephen, Jason?
Anybody who wants to join,
Okay, sure.
I suppose. Yeah, and it needn't be a long call, probably 10 minutes.
And so that we can appropriately introduce him at the meeting, that sort of thing. So yeah, that would be great. Okay.
I think we're done.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved. All right.
Great to
Thank
see
you,
all of you.
everyone.
Nice seeing you guys.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.